Hi kids, today we're starting the very first chapter of your class 12th English main literature book, that is and the first chapter there is the last lesson. Now here in this book we have lot of stories and then you have poems as well, so prose and poems. And the first thing that we're starting with is the first story, the first prose that is given in your textbooks, and the name of that chapter or the story is The Last Lesson. Now what is this story all about? Well, we all live in some specific geographical region, right? And we know that there are certain things that we actually relate to when we are living to a specific area or probably to a country. And one very important thing or one very important part of who we are or how we act, how we present ourselves is through our language. So everywhere, every country has its own language. Every community has its own language. So language is an integral part of who we are. Therefore, now you must be thinking that why am I talking so much about language? So the reason here is that this story that we are going to start now, The Last Lesson, is actually talking about the importance of one's language in one's life. We may not value our own mother tongue or our language maybe at this point of time. But what if we are never allowed to speak our mother tongue? We've been told to, altogether learn a new language and do everything in that and completely forget about our own language, right? So on this very theme, on this very line, we see that this story is based. Here, the last lesson is basically, the author is actually based in France. But it is also based in that time zone where there was a war going on between France and Prussia. And Prussia, whose head was was being led by Otto and Bismarck, and eventually France was defeated. And then Prussia, which decided that they are going to implement some of its policies or some new reforms in some of the territories of France. And one such thing was they wanted that the speaking of French language should be stopped. So on this line, this particular chapter is based. How we realize the importance of one's own mother tongue. Why it is so important to learn our own language. See, no one is saying that learning other languages is not right. Definitely knowing as many languages is very good. But not knowing or not allowed to speak, write, read in our own mother tongue is something that is actually very painful, right? So we are going to understand this in greater depth when we start this particular story. So let us start. So now about the author. The author is Alphonse Daudet and he was a French novelist. So this author himself is the main character or one of the main characters in this story, and he is a French novelist, which means that he's writing stories and he's based in France. He's himself a Frenchman and he is a French novelist and a short story writer. The Last Lesson, the very chapter, the very story that we are reading right now, is set in the days of the Franco-Prussian War. Franco-Prussian War is the war between France and Prussia. War between France and Prussia. This was the Franco-Prussian War, which happened in 1870 to 1871. Now, in which France was defeated by Prussia, and who was leading Prussia? Otto and Bismarck. Now, once France was defeated, Prussia then consisted of what we are now calling the nations of Germany, Poland, and parts of Austria. So in this story, the French districts of Alsace and Lorraine have been passed on to the Prussian hands. And now we need to read the story to find out what effect this had on life at school. So I've already given you a brief outline or maybe a greater hint of what we are reading in this story or what is basically the theme of this story. But here we are also getting to know that this is related to the life at school, how it has changed, this war when two districts, Alsace and Lorraine, because France was defeated by Prussia, these two districts have been passed on to the Prussian army, and now some changes have been implemented. And how is it affecting the life at school is what we are going to read now. So let's start with the story.